Table for One, episode 26, Time Stories. Hey everybody, welcome back to Table for One. This is episode 26, and this week we are looking at Time Stories. All of it. This is once again Anthony with Jason.
Yo, my peoples, what's up?
And like I said, we're going to look at everything that's come out for Time Stories to date. This is actually going to be kind of a bit of a split episode.
So then how we're going to do it is we're going to have first section is going to be for basic gameplay. It's meant for every single person, even if you're interested in Time Stories or not. There's going to be zero spoilers. So, you can listen, you can see if it works for you as a project, as a solo game, especially, for our audience. So the first part will be absolutely spoiler free. And then we're going to get into the modules, just talking about some of the, light spoilers, like kind of talking about it, giving reviews. I've played all of them. Anthony's played a few of them. We're not going to go into details there, but we'll just kind of give our impressions. And, some people don't even want to know that, so you can stop the podcast there. But if you want to know what our impressions are of the modules without spoilers, major ones, then go ahead and listen. So then we're going to end the episode there. And then after that, since I played all the modules, we are going to have a full-blown spoilers, everything Time Stories, every secret, every puzzle. So that's going to be after the outro music.
We will mark this clearly for everything. You'll have look at the time codes right now. You'll see when we go into mild spoilers, and it's really easy to know for the full spoilers. Just wait until after the music. And there will be more bonus content for those of you who've already played this or who have no intention of ever playing it.
There you go. And we're going to get into Expedition Endurance, which is the new Time Stories. If you're just tuning in for that, then, fast forward into the thing a little bit. But we definitely wanted to take a step back because not everybody's played Time Stories. I see a lot of people asking, is this a good solo? Should I get into it? So we wanted to tackle that first, and then we'll get into the review of the latest module and then spoilers.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's kind of like Pandemic Legacy, which we talked about a couple months ago, is can it play solo? And everybody gives a little bit different of an answer, but in this case, we actually have one for you. So we'll kind of dive into that a little bit.
All right, so let's get into it. So this is just basic gameplay. So what is Time Stories? So designers by the way, it's designed by Manuel Rosoy. I believe that's his first game design, which is what a splash to be your first game. And this was published by Space Cowboys, which is a subsidiary of Asmodee, in 2015, I believe. Yes. So the designers call it a dexploration game. But what is a dexploration game? Well, so every module of Time Stories is a deck of tarot-sized cards, so pretty big cards, which contains a whole adventure, which is usually some kind of mystery the players have to solve. So there's some mechanisms, I'll get into that, but really one of the first things that really leaps out before anything is the art. The art on Time Stories is among the best in the industry. They get the best of the best to do this art because it's a mystery, because it's a narrative-driven game. It almost has to be good, and it delivers. All 5 modules just blow you away with like the production quality of it and how beautiful it is. They've gotten into a little bit of a problem with it because that's why the games have been delayed. They were supposed to come out with probably more modules. They were aiming for 4 a year, but the art has become so cumbersome, and they want to hold back until they get the absolute best. So then I think that's worth it. I hope that hopefully they kind of clean that up and they get things kind of coming out. But it definitely shows how beautiful these cards are. So then. Okay, so what are you doing? You have a beautiful deck of cards. What do they do? So the theme of the game is that players are time travelers from the future, and they're trying to fix anomalies that are occurring at various times in our history. So we're in the future, and then we zoom into people's bodies. Think the old show Quantum Leap, if for some of the older fogies out there, like myself. Then you become these characters, and as these characters, you try to solve some kind of mystery that's happening. So then the deck is split up into a bunch of different locations. Your characters will travel to each location, which is represented by a panorama of cards. So you take like a chunk of cards, 48 cards, you lay them out, and it makes a panorama of a room or a scene or a location of some sort. And then you do stuff. You gather clues, you get items, you get weapons, you interact with the people, and you make interesting choices about what to do and where to go. So you're literally exploring the deck, right? The So that's the narrative element of it. There is kind of this game piece of it, which is represented whenever there's a conflict. So you're going to eventually run into traps, or you're going to run into the occasional fight, depending on what the module is. So then how do you resolve that stuff? You roll dice. So the game has special dice that you roll against whatever skills your character has. So depending on if it's a module with a lot of fighting, or if it's a module with a lot of talking, you'll have a charisma skill. If you're sneaking, you'll have a dexterity skill, that kind of thing. So that's how the game resolves conflict, is the dice. That's great. What does this have to do with time travel, really? Well, the time travel occurs when you run out of time. So you only have a limited amount of time in order to explore each of these locations and gather clues. If you take too much time, if you're too inefficient with your run, you'll run out of time. You get booted back into the future. This dude Bob will give you a sourpuss face and say, "Oh, that was terrible." He'll always have some insult for you and then send you back into the module. So when you're running the module again, you're going to have all this new information, right? So you're going to know where the knife is. You're going to know where this clue is. You're going to know where this, and this links up. So you'll be able to do the run more efficiently. And that's where the game of it really kind of starts to surface, because you really are trying to explore the deck in the most efficient way possible so that you can get through the mystery. And if you're efficient enough, you could do it. You can kind of solve the mystery within 2 or 3 runs. Sometimes it takes longer. But, for the most part, that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to gather enough information in order to be able to explore the deck efficiently and then eventually solve the mystery. Like every single one of these modules has a point. It's not just like an open-ended adventure like, say, Tales of the Arabian Nights or something, where it's really narrative driven and you just kind of you roll, or I forget exactly how the mechanism works, but you're just kind of having this unfolding adventure depending on randomness. You really are trying to accomplish something, and you either pass or you fail. And that's basically Time Stories. It is a choose-your-own-adventure game in that you can make choices within the different locations and the different paths that you take, but you are trying to achieve one main objective. So, Anthony, so I'm the co-op guy on the podcast, so I think that people are going to know where I land on this. How did you encounter Time Stories?
Yeah, so I'm the puzzle guy, so I think we're both gonna land around the same area. I'm gonna be honest, like my first encounter with this, I wasn't really psyched for it. It didn't sound like something I would super enjoy. I'm not a huge RPG guy. I'm not a huge co-op guy, although I'm come around a little bit on the latter. But a friend of mine in a local game group brought it 2 or 3 weeks in a row, and then finally convinced enough of us to sit down and play it at an early enough time that we were able to play through the whole thing. And so I'd say like the first playthrough of, and this is the Asylum, so the one that comes in the base box. The first playthrough, like, okay, I guess I don't really understand what we're doing. It's really pretty to look at, and then you fail, and then you go back through again, and then that's when it clicks. And you're like, oh, I already know a lot of these things. Okay, we can use this information, and then people get really animated. And it was a lot of fun. There are not many games I've encountered where you are playing a puzzle actually cooperatively, legitimately, without one person just kind of taking over. And it doesn't, I'm sure there are people who could do that with this, even without full information, of what other people are doing or what they have or what they've seen. But it seems unlikely and pretty rare. It's not like Pandemic where everybody can look at the same board and one person's like, I figured it out. It's just very unique and interesting in that way. And there's the thing I like about it too is I like the puzzle aspect of it. It's why I like that first module so much. The logic puzzles and everything that go into it. But that's not necessarily all that's here. There's a lot of other things, and every module can kind of do its own thing, which we'll get into later. But yeah, it was kind of a stumble and a pull by a friend who really wanted people to play his new game with him. And then immediately he was like, well, now I need to get this and play more of these modules, which I have since done.
What Anthony's referring to is that, there's modules that have But when we say puzzles, it means a couple of different things. So every single module is a puzzle in the sense
Hmm.
that mysteries are puzzles. So how do you solve a mystery is that you gather information, you suss out clues, you eliminate things that, dead ends that are impossible, all that kind of stuff. So that's a very narrative thing, and you're doing that in every Time Stories thing. So what the first basic scenario, and I'm not going to spoil too much because these things pop up in the future scenarios as well, is that there's also logic puzzles where you don't necessarily need to have gathered a lot of information, but you need to brain burn yourself and puzzle out what's happening. And the fact that it's taking a bunch of different experiences like that and putting it and combining it in different ways is really cool. And that's not all. Like, sometimes there's modules where there's a lot of combat and a lot of rolling and a lot of skill checks and just, bam, 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 you're just kind of romping through it. Really different experience. And then there's, no more other modules where it's really a story thing. So there's not a lot of rolling or puzzle solving, but the mood is awesome. The writing is awesome. The things that happen are very memorable. So Time Stories kind of just does all of that, depending on which module you get. I don't know a game system that is capable of that. And so Time Stories for me is one of the few games I rate a 10. I love it.
Yeah, I have it up there. I don't think I have it as a full 10, but for what it is and the type of game it is and my usual feelings about these types of games, it's probably my favorite of that. I mean, module systems in general just generally don't work, let alone this type of module based system where you're inserting a different story within this greater timeline with all these different possibilities and the way you interact with the other players. It's just from a purely technical standpoint, it's impressive to look at, but it's also a lot of fun to play. So that helps.
So is it good as a solo?
Aha.
That's the rub, right? We're kind of repeating some of the stuff that you've heard about it, but how it plays as a solo is a very different experience. So as we ran into with Pandemic Legacy, you'll see a lot of people on forums and different other places. They'll say, no, you have to play this in a group. It's only good in a group. And with Time Stories in particular, I did mention this in the description, but there's a limited information mechanism there where if you look at a card, you can't just read the card to somebody else or show them. You look at it, you put it down, and you just talk through it. So it makes you role play, it makes you kind of ingest and interpret. So things can get lost in that, which creates a lot of the mystery and a lot of tension, and it challenges you to be a good player, have a good memory, all that kind of stuff. You lose a lot of that, and you lose all of it when you're playing solo. So a lot of people will say, like, maybe unlike Pandemic Legacy, you can kind of get away with it because there's a game there, and you can always just play the game of Pandemic, which is a good solo game. Solo. Some people will jump on Time Stories and says you lose that limited information, you lose that collective mystery solving, so it is not a good solo. That's what some people say.
Yeah, I've heard both, and they're both fair. I mean, I can't personally. I don't mind if you remove the limited information aspect. We talked about Gloomhaven a few weeks ago, and more last week with the designer. And part of that game, when you play it solo, is you gain perfect information. And when you gain perfect information in any game where you wouldn't normally have it, you have to adjust difficulty. And it doesn't really work that way with Time Stories. So you kind of have to get. I feel like you need to get a lot of the enjoyment from the game from the other parts. Like if that's your favorite part is the tension of trying to work out what information everybody else at the table has and piece it together, then maybe it won't be a great solo game for you. But if you like all the rest of it and the story and the logic puzzles and all the information you're pulling together and all of that, then I don't see why any of that's necessarily hampered.
The where I really come down on this is that this is a game. So Pandemic Legacy, I could totally play solo. I have no problem with it. Pandemic is great. I happen to play it in a group, and I had some memorable experiences with it. So, but I could play it solo, and it's fine. Time Stories, I definitely do prefer in a group. However, I want it to be in a group with people I know, and people who I know are going to be into it as much as I'm into it. They want the same things. They're looking for the same experience. Not exactly the same, but at least it's a little bit similar. If your choice is solo or like a bunch of new people at a game night, or you're running it at a convention with a bunch of people you don't know, I'm going to say buyer beware, and I think you'd rather play this solo. I'll tell you why. So I've run the scenarios a bunch of times, and I know you're not supposed to like play it multiple times, but I don't care. I'll play it. It's like a novel. I'll play it as many times as I want to. I keep my mouth shut so that the people I'm playing with can play it. And just kind of like be a game master basically, and then other people are working through the puzzle. So it was a new group. It was two people who were really into it, but then there was one person who was just complaining about all the dice rolling. Oh, this is so lucky, and we're just rolling, and like he was kind of being grumpy about it. And so that was like the mechanics person. But then on the other side, we had the LARPer, who basically treated this like a role-playing game and was trying to like sneak in a little bit of betrayal. It's like, oh, I what's behind this card? I don't know. What do you think is behind this card? It's like, no, this is a cooperative game. At the end of the day, this is not a LARP, But like having those two people at the same table was driving the two people who were trying to play. They were driving them nuts, and it really took away from the enjoyment of the game. They ended up playing the other modules without anybody. They just wanted to do it by themselves, the two of them, and I helped run them through it. So that really could have killed the whole experience for you, and that would be a real shame. So if you're gonna like play time stories and those are your only options, then yeah, I would actually really ask you to consider to play this solo, and just to get the mystery solving and the dexploration, quote unquote, in there. It's better than what I just described.
It sounds like it, yeah.
Oh, man. The other thing I do with this game is, let's say it's like, especially one of the bigger adventures, I will play it solo after I play the multiplayer. So then, and I will take the paths not taken. So if we solve the mystery one way, then I'll go back and I will solve the mystery in a second way or a third way. One of the modules in particular, we'll get to that in the light spoiler section, lends itself to that, where you really could just take a whole bunch of things, do something totally different, and do your thing. And then my group would never do that. Never. They did it. They're done. Whatever. Me, I went back in, laid it back out, played it solo. It was good. So I guess those would be the two scenarios where I'd actually recommend this as a solo game. Okay, so that's basically our recommendations, our thoughts about it as a solo. We are now going to transition into light spoilers. So if you don't want to be spoiled at all, thank you very much for joining us, and please stay tuned next week. But if you want to hear a little bit about the 5 scenarios, especially Expedition Endurance, which just came out, then join us after the spoiler wall. Spoiler alert, incoming light spoilers in 3, 2, 1. Okay, so now we are past the spoiler section, and we got the 5 scenarios. So the base scenario is Asylum. Like, people wanted to call it Arkham Asylum, but it's just Asylum. The second is the Marcy Case. Third is Prophecy of Dragons. Then Under the Mask was the 4th. There was a cycle of 4 that were designed before the game came out. So it was those 4. And then Expedition Endurance was designed after. So, I think we kind of bled into talking about Asylum. I think Asylum is the favorite of people who love logic puzzles. So there was definitely a mystery there that you went to solve, but it also had these pure logic puzzles where you had to be paying attention, you have to be thinking in order to solve it, which I think was really exciting. Really hooked people, especially, so Anthony was mentioning how he's kind of a puzzle guy. That's probably a good starting scenario for someone like that.
Yeah, I love this. It was great. I haven't experienced anything really like this before, or since, I should say, but it was it had the perfect mix of the story elements and the puzzles to draw me in.
Mm-hmm. So it was set in the, I think, a 1920s insane asylum. You get shunted into these characters that are all weird. So like these literally insane people who like one's like a coke addict, and these other kind of like I can't even remember how weird they were, but it was cool, and the story was engaging. The puzzle elements were definitely there. So after I played Asylum, I thought I knew what this was, right? Like this is going to be a bunch of mysteries, and we're going to have all these logic puzzles. And I'm like, okay, all right, I'm down with this. And then I played the Marcy case, which came out at the same time, and that's actually what blew me away about the system, was because Marcy case was totally different. When you open Marcy case, these are only light spoilers. I'm not going to tell you what happens. Boom, you just fight. There's a big brawl basically, and then you just go from there. And there's a lot of like fighting and adventure and rolling dice and all kind of stuff. Very fast paced module, and then so I was like, if I'd have taken one and the other, I would have been okay. But the fact that if I played one and then the other really close together, I'm like, wow, this system can do this, both of these things. That's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I found it impressive. I don't think I was quite as engaged by the second as I was the base, but I also was. I know some people were turned off a little just because it was so different, and that wasn't the case either. I don't think I had quite your reaction of "Holy moly, what can this system do?" But I was also impressed that this was the same game playing out two very different ways, which you don't. I mean, you don't see that generally in much of anything, let alone in a board game.
I really love the Marcy case. It was definitely like brisker and shorter. The theme of the Marcy case is 1980s. I'm a child of the 80s, so I kind of appreciated some of the little hints in there. Like the cover of the box has a tape, like a cassette tape. I remember cassette tapes. That was pretty cool. So, and so I'm again, that not going into the heavy spoilers with it, but I really enjoyed the Marcy case as well, and that's the kind of flavor you're going to get from it. So then the next one is Prophecy of Dragons. Man, Prophecy of Dragons. So that one really took things up to another level in terms of scope. So I mentioned in the non-spoiler part of the show that there was a module where I was able to go back and take different paths. This was the one. You see it with the deck. The deck is physically larger than the other decks, so I don't think I'm spoiling too much by saying this. But there is so much content here. And fantasy world, but it was like a kind of a different take on a fantasy world. It wasn't quite just tra-la-la elves and hi-ho dwarves. They were like, it was more urban, more gritty, I guess. I'm not sure. Definitely more urban. I guess I'll just say that urban kind of fantasy with dwarves and elves, and they really knocked it out of the park with that one. It is my favorite module to date.
Yeah, this thing is ridiculous. Like, you play the first couple and you think, wow, how do you do all this in the same system? And you play this one and it's just ratchets, I guess, volume up to 11. There's just so much stuff here. And I guess it makes it all the more impressive that you can play through it and not feel like you saw everything or did everything, which is the case for, I guess, all of these, but even because you're cycling back through them, so you generally go back and you see different paths. And like you said, you could go in a completely different path here, which I have not done. But I have been tempted to do as a solo gamer who has this nice table over here, just to see like what I didn't see already.
So you finished Prophecy of Dragons?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. This one, I think the divisive thing about, because when this first dropped, it's got a lot of very negative reviews because it's so long, but it had no logic puzzles. So in a way, it's almost like Asylum set people up where it's like, oh, where are they? Where are the puzzles? Where are the puzzles? And this one doesn't really have that. It's a very long narrative and a lot of different paths. So I can see a lot of people being kind of turned off by that because of how long it is. Like if I'm going to spend 4 or 5 hours on this module, then give me something besides, exploring cards and rolling dice. So I could see where people kind of have an issue with this. With me, the world was so realized that I didn't care. I enjoyed it. I loved it. And like I said, it's my favorite module. How did you find that?
Yeah, man. I mean, we talked about this with Ignacy a few weeks ago. Like, the choose your own adventure style of gaming. I love that idea of just being able to kind of go down a path and explore these different things and uncover different stuff. It doesn't have to be puzzle based. I think I really liked that existed, but I try to approach each of these modules in a vacuum as much as I can and not think, oh, why isn't it like this one, or why doesn't it use this mechanic, or this was so good, why don't you doing it again? It's clear that these are all designed to be, self-contained things where they're very different approaches. So I like this approach. I also like the first approach. If you were going to tell me it had to be one or the other for every module after that, then I might have a different opinion. But in this case, yeah, it was definitely a lot of fun.
So then now we get to Under the Mask, and I don't believe you play Under the Mask, right, Anthony?
No, we Prophecy of Dragons, and then that was it. So, and that was even like with the group I was with, we didn't even quite finish it. I kind of just finished it out on my own just to see what happened. So that's kind of where I've petered out.
Mm-hmm. And then, so might have been a good jumping off point, to be honest with you. So then, lest you think that, we're just going to kind of blow smoke and, rainbows and sunshine about this thing. Under the Mask is actually, I think it's the weakest module. And it definitely kind of highlights some of the flaws of Time Stories. So you get this so Under the Mask, you're in ancient Egypt, and you have to solve a mystery surrounding ancient Egypt. There's some parts of it that are super cool, right? And some things that it does that do not appear in any of the previous modules, which is, I'm always down for that. That's always great. This one was awkward when it came to time. For this one, it was very fetch questy. So anyone who's played World of Warcraft or Skyrim, and they can kind of know what that is. Fetch questy means like you get a quest and they say, okay, go fetch 5 bear pelts and bring them back, or go fetch this and bring it back. Very mechanical. There's no real interest. It's just grindy. And there were parts of this that really were grindy, where let's say you finish a run and then you go back in and it's like, okay, this isn't. I have to go to all 7 of these locations, which is 14 time. Oh my God, I only have 16 time left to do what I want to do. Every module does that to some extent, but I really felt it in this module. And just speaking of that, why do we have to go through every single location to redraw our steps? Like, if I found a knife, do I really have to go back to a location just to find a knife? Can I just put it in a little extra dimensional bag and it just appears in the future? Now I have a knife now. Well, it's such a unfortunate kind of waste of time, and it makes you roll that time dice. God forbid so there's a dice you roll to determine how much time it takes to go from one place to another. God forbid you roll a couple 3s when you're just fetch questing, literally. Ugh. So that one you felt the grind. And when I played this with my second group, they were like, we basically played all 4 modules straight because the person was leaving to Finland or something, and they're like, I have to play this now. So we powered through it. And they really felt like, oh my God, we are grinding through this. And I could see that. So I think Under the Mask, there's definitely good elements to it. And some people I've heard it's their favorite, not mine. So I'll leave it at that.
All right. I left at the right time, I guess.
And yeah, so then that brings us to the last one, Expedition Endurance. This one is, the theme of this is an Antarctic expedition in the 1910s. So you're on the ship, and the mystery, something happens to the ship, and you have to figure out what happens to the ship. So I'm reading a lot of the reviews of it, and a lot of people really liked it, and I could see why, because the story is cool. It's a very cool story. There's something that happens at the very beginning, which is super, super cool. And then there's elements of as you go on that are really, pretty, very thematic as well. So as far as the story, it was really good. But this one, it didn't have any of that other stuff. It continues to not really have the logic puzzles. It continues to go away from the combat and the dice rolling. It really was basically a story, and The story was cool, but there's a whole bunch of half baked ideas in here. There's some cards in there that could be really cool, and they didn't matter. And there's some more cards in there that could have been even cooler than that, and it didn't really matter. So I was really disappointed in this because it came after the 4, and I figured that, since it was designed after the game first hit, so they internalized some of the critiques and tune the system a little bit better. This one felt mechanically like a step backwards, which, maybe it was my own expectations. Maybe I just needed to kind of let the story happen. But I really did feel like that, some of the stuff that I noticed in the other modules under the mask, especially with the fetch questy part of it, that definitely is here as well. We at the end of it, like the last run, we were like, okay, 14 time, this is what we get. Boom, done. Let's just make a couple rolls to smooth it out. Boom, done. That when you're skipping like a third of a run just to get do the bookkeeping, man, and I has to be better ways to handle that. So cool elements, but the warts are starting to show a little bit for me in Expedition Endurance, and I really hope that future modules kind of get back to where we're supposed to be with this. I don't know. I maybe this is where this is going. Maybe that's not going to be as good. And again, a lot of reviewers really liked it. I just don't share their opinion.
Yeah, it's a shame, and especially because this came out a year and a half after the original game was released, so it was a long development time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So when you played the first 3 modules, did you notice that fetch questy kind of aspect that I'm talking about?
Yeah, a little bit. It's going to be part of any time travel game, I guess. You're going to rehash certain pieces. I never remember feeling particularly bored, I guess is the feeling I would describe to that, doing that. But it definitely sounds like the last couple modules that I have not played are a little more grueling in that way.
Yeah. So, again, Time Stories is, it's still a 10. Like it probably won't not be a 10 just because of the experiences that I've already had with it. I can't take those away. Like the highs of this game are super high. It's always going to be a 10 for me, and I'm in for the next couple modules at least, just to see if they really kind of iron out some of the kind of the mechanical wonkiness of some of the some of the later modules at least. So I'm going to stick with it through that. But I do have to be honest and say, you know what? Not really too much. It's starting to take a little bit too much off the table for me. And so I'd actually love to hear what other people think. I'm obviously looking around the reviewer base. I'm in a little bit of the minority here. So, I'd love to hear from other people if they, played this scenario or if they're just kind of their Time Stories impressions in particular.
Yeah, definitely, guys. If you have thoughts, feedback, disagreements, feel free to reach out on all of the various places that we hang out and let us know. Can tell us what we're wrong about. I know there's a lot of I mean to ask you this too. I know there's a lot of fan modules out there. Have you tried any of those?
So there are a couple that you can download. I have not tried them, but the early reviews on some of them, so I'll read comments about them and everything. They literally are the worst of Time Stories. Like, okay, go A, go B, go C. You run out of time. Go A, go B, go C, go D. You run out of time. A, B, C, E. So I know they accepted one. They accepted one of the fan modules, and they're actually producing it as a full-blown module, which is pretty cool. The early returns in the modules the fan modules don't sound all that promising. I mean, I'll definitely keep in touch with it and see if there's something that good comes out. The part of the problem with that is that the game is based on art, and the game is based on having high quality cars that you're moving all over the place. If you're going to play a fan module, you're going to have to do a print and play. And if you're going to do this game kind of justice, then the print and play needs to have an investment in it. And if a module isn't that strong, and if it doesn't have official backing, then am I going to make that print and play investment? Ugh, that's a tough one.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a lot of cards to print out, especially if they're designed on, some guy's computer, not professionally.
Yeah, with the art is coming from Google Images as opposed
Mm.
to really effective. So, like I said, I'm still in. I'm a little bit disappointed by the last two modules. Expedition Endurance is a little bit better than Under the Mask. I will give it that. It does have a better story than Under the Mask. I want to see more.
It's kind of like when your favorite show hits like season 4 or 5, and you're like, oh no, what's happening? It's going downhill. It's still one of the best shows ever made, but what are they doing? They'll turn
I've
it
yet
around.
I've yet to encounter a show that was awesome for the first three seasons, kind of a little bit disappointing for the next two, and then came rallying back for season seven.
That's a good point. Yeah,
So don't say it's like a TV like that, please.
that's true. That does insinuate the slow, continuing decline of quality. Well, hopefully, by allowing other designers into it and get some new ideas in there.
Right, definitely cool.
All right, so that's going to go ahead and wrap up our pre-mega spoilers side of the podcast, and for most people listening, the podcast in general. Give you the regular spiel here. If you are interested in communicating with us and telling us about your Time Stories experience, or asking questions, or letting us know where you disagree, hit us up on the Board Game Geek Guild at 1735 there, or on BoardGamersAnonymous.com, where you'll find the show notes for this episode. You can leave a comment there. And we also post show notes and links on Facebook as well as Twitter. You can reach out to us on either of those. We check them all the time. We'll get right back to you. Also, if you can stop by iTunes and the Google Play Store, leave us a quick review, little rating, let us know what you think. Helps more people find the podcast, which is awesome. And in the meantime, for those of you who either don't plan on playing this and are interested to know what happens, or maybe skipped a module and want to know what happens in it, or have played them all and just want to hear someone else's experience, stay tuned until after the break, after the music's over. Jason's going to take you on a little bit of a journey. All right, but for this week, that's going to be everything. Until next time, we will save you a seat at this table for one.
You on the other side, everybody. Hello. It's just us cool kids who've played all the Time Story scenarios, and we're here to talk about spoilers. Full spoilers. So if you manage to stay past the ending music and you're still here and you don't want to learn spoilers, then you are in the wrong place. So for all of you who have played, wow. Uh, yeah, Time Stories is awesome. I think all five modules were great in its own different ways, and let's just talk about in particular what we liked about all of them and what we struggled with as well. So we'll start with Asylum, the base scenario. This, I think, the thing that people remember is that last culminating puzzle, the read item 29, I think it was. Wow. Our group really struggled with that one. It didn't take us too long, but uh, it was such a new thing, and I remember going on BGG and thinking, "Oh my God, we got it wrong. We can't solve this thing. We must have gotten a rule wrong." But eventually, we kind of figured it out. I ended up playing this with another group, and they really, really struggled with it. They got as far as read it. And we're looking at them going, "Oh my God, you're so close!" And I have my mouth shut. I'm not, I know that I knew the puzzles, so I just kind of, laid back. Um, I do like playing this over and over again. I mean, the puzzle is the puzzle, but like it has this scenario in general just has a really good vibe to it. The characters are really interesting, offbeat. Um, the different little dead ends are funny, like the guy with the plunger. That really kind of set the tone for Time Stories, where like they're very willing to kind of lead you on into a giant dead end. There was that one dead end that was really frustrating because you had to do a bunch of fighting, and all of a sudden the card just tells you nothing to see here. That was a little bit deflating for the second group we played with, but I think the world that it created was a really good introduction. It was a really good way to kind of introduce the scene, and I'm glad it was the first module. Although with one caveat, the caveat being, I feel like Asylum was the only Time Stories module with multiple logic puzzles, including a grand logic puzzle. So there wasn't just like solving mysteries or getting information to solve some kind of narrative mystery. It was an actual logic puzzle you had to solve. And I don't think any of the other scenarios did that. So in future scenarios, I definitely detect a sense where people are reviewing it and people are talking about it. I definitely get a sense that people wanted more of that and they're wondering where that went. So maybe they kind of messed up a little bit by that being the very first scenario. Something with like a grand logic puzzle set people up for their expectations. But, you know, still, in terms of an immersive story, in terms of interesting things happening, in terms of kind of setting the scene of what this could be, Asylum was really, really good. And I like the fact that Marcy Case was released next to it because it was a very, very different module. So there wasn't a lot of combat. There was some skill checks and everything, but there wasn't a lot of combat in Asylum. Marcy Case really threw you in. First scene, you have to go to a bunch of the different cards and you have to fight, 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 fight. All these zombies are everywhere, and everywhere you go, as you go through the location, even like the church, I remember the priest led you into a room and you had to fight again, So our first runs was just a lot of dice rolling and fighting, and it was really a change. It was like a shock from what Asylum was, which was just much more like kind of mood intensive suspense thing. Here you're like it's like kind of rock'em sock'em robots and stuff, or rock'em sock'em zombies, and it was fun. It was cool, and that was really when I fell in love with Time Stories, because it's like, okay, like I said, in the main cast, they're two different things. So yeah, I'm totally into this. And I definitely like the fact that by the time it felt very dice fatiguey, where you're rolling so much and there's really not a lot else you could do to get past these things, you end up learning enough about the scenario as you go through it, where you know which fights to avoid. So, which was really, really satisfying, because like by our third run in our group, we were really able to, you go here, let's get the gun from here, let's get the girl from there, let's get the scientist, or whatever the things we end up doing. So it was that was a nice pacing to the module. So lots of combat, lots of dice rolling early, but then as you get into it, you're really kind of focused on the mystery and you are just doing it, and that's it. We're good to go. And the mystery itself was pretty cool. I love the scanner on the cards. So I didn't even notice that there were these little color bars until the very end of the module, when you get to the helicopter and you have that item that gives you the other half of it, the scanner. Love that. It was a little bit tricky because I think as you go through like once you see the scanner, and then we had a couple of people, and I think the second group that I ran it with, that remembered the pattern, but they were really good at remembering the pattern. So that at that point you're kind of out of the game, and they kind of brute force the ending, which I wish there was a different way to do that, but again, the limitations of cards. I'm not really sure how they could have done it. The fact of so that was a little bit weird for me. But it was still really well done. I think in my first group, we just played it straight, and we totally got it wrong. we gave the wrong girl because we had bad information. And it was, oh my God, I'll always remember that, because we were so pumped. We were about to end the mission, and we ended up giving the wrong girl, and it's like, ugh. So we had to go back and find out who the right girl was, and we eventually ended up doing it. So those two together, that was a really good introduction to Time Stories, because it gave you the breadth of what's possible in the system. So then the next module was Prophecy of Dragons. So Prophecy of Dragons, my favorite, absolutely my favorite. I can see, like I said, in the main cast, it's divisive because for how long it is and for how much stuff there is to do, there's not a lot to solve. You're really just kind of going from A to B to C to D. There's a little bit of mystery, but the mystery isn't logic based. It's more information gathering, and kind of putting the pieces together that way. But I love the fact that there were so many ways to get to that tunnel, and then the tunnel was that safe point, and then after that you did whatever. But before then, I love the fact that there was multiple paths you can take. The paths were based on the characters that you took, so you could go the alchemist way, or you could go the kind of trying to remember exactly. I think the thief had their own way, kind of going into the back room or something. And there were different ways to do it, which was fabulous. I ended up, after that, I did our first playthrough. This was the one that I went back and played solo again, just straight up. So, we did it our first time. Then the second time, I took different characters just by myself and went through the scenario, and it was really different. And I started noticing things about the cards that I hadn't seen before. Really, really rewarding. I'm not solving anything, but at the same time, I'm in the narrative. I'm reading the cards. I just feels really good to play. And then once you get to that save point, which by the way, use that more. Love that save point. Then that second part, not quite second half because the 2/3 of the game was the back and forth, and then this last part, which is kind of this narrative propulsion straight through. Loved every minute of that. Probably my favorite individual kind of time spent with this game was after that save point up until the end. The end was a little dice rolly. I'm not the biggest fan of like a giant dice fest to end something, but it worked, and I think there was enough ways to mitigate it where it was okay. But that whole thing where you're going through the cards that have the different paths on it, and depending on what you chose at the beginning, did you take the fire wall potion? Did you take the grappling hook? All that stuff, so much fun, and I just had a grin on my face the entire time doing that. Uh, Definitely my favorite. Prophecy of Dragons. I'm more than happy to play that again. So I really think it's representative of what this system can do, and I'm looking forward to more based on that one. So then there was Under the Mask. Had a lot to live up to after Prophecy of Dragons. My opinion didn't really live up to that. It was good. It was definitely better for me the second time around because what happened to us the first time, and this happened to another group, so I was able to kind of, I admit it, I shouldn't have done this, so I was able to kind of steer the group without them knowing it. But we ended up going through, and we ended up not finding the Sebeki character. The Sebeki character is the one I think that had the mask itself, and that was like a chain. You had to like open a bunch of stuff, do a bunch of stuff, and the Sebeki character was the last part of it. What ended up happening was that in the scenario you had so little time that like, oh, we only have 6 time left. But let's go to the tunnel that you open. You end up opening a tunnel on the upper left hand of the map, I believe. So it's like, oh, let's just go there and see what happens and whatever, without doing the Sebeki part. So then you go through it, and turns out that you need to do the Sebeki part, which is fine. It's fine. You can go back, but you end up they don't give you enough time to do all that. It's only 30 time, and maybe 14 to 15, 16 units about there. You're fetch questing. You're getting this character. You're identity changing into this character. You're going. You're getting this pass, and you're getting this key. And by the time you're actually done, it's like you barely have any time to do anything else. So you can only if you do the thing you really really need to do, which is get through the whole thing, get to Sebeki's house, get the actual all the items that you need. But you don't have any time left, and you have to kind of know that ahead of time. So that was super frustrating. And the second group actually both groups that I played, because I played it twice. Both groups that I played with ended up being kind of unsatisfied by that. Uh, if they'd given us more time, we could kind of breathe a little bit, explore. Might have been a lot different. But the fact that it was so tight, we just felt rushed. There's a lot that we missed. There was, when I went back and played it solo, there was a couple of things I think we hadn't seen the Snake Charmer lady at all. So when I went back, I found her. I was like, oh, okay, great. There's another like noble character you could be who gives you a ton of money. that would have been nice to have some breathing room to explore that. Uh, but so I think that a lot of that stuff kind of seems like it could have been fixed by a little bit of tuning. So if they'd tuned that correctly, given us some more time, made the fix the branching paths a little bit, might have been okay. As it was, still good. I'm not gonna say don't play it, but that's where the flaw started to come up. So now we have Expedition Endurance. Uh, Unfortunately, I can't say that this was the best module of the series, which is disappointing to me because, as I was saying in the main cast, this came out after the 4 came out. So I was hoping that the community feedback would make its way into this game a little bit. So maybe I came into this with a little too many expectations. This module has gotten a lot of good reviews from other reviewers. And maybe it's just my own expectations, but really, there's some issues with the system at this point that really need to be addressed if I'm going to kind of maintain my, oh, this is a perfect 10 enthusiasm for this game. So good parts first. Which is comes at the very beginning. That first thing was amazing. The thing where you got ported 2 days ahead when the bad thing already happened to the ship, and it's all frozen. There's dead bodies everywhere, and you're going through. You barely have any time. You're gonna die. It gave us that disoriented feeling that we're kind of what's going on here. And then, well, what was also pretty cool is that we actually figured it out, so to speak. We remembered that Bob was gonna port us to October 24th, yet we saw a journal making reference to October 26th. So we're like, huh, what's going on here? And then it was confirmed when we got back to the future time, which was great. Uh, time that the fact that the module was able to futz with time like that was absolutely amazing. One thing that we didn't like about it was it ended up not mattering. We It didn't have any impact on our choices when we got to the normal time where we are supposed to solve the mystery. So we knew where a desk was, we knew where a dead body was, maybe I think one of the girl who had the shotgun kind of lined up with one of the dead bodies in the um, future time. Great, some good narrative elements, but in terms of our decision making, there was no impact. And it was there was so much possibility there. Like we really could have learned something in that future time that really affected how we did the run in the October 24th time. Not sure how they would have pulled that off, but I'm not designing the game. So that was my one disappointment with that first part. But again, really, mind blowing that it's even possible in a game like this. As far as the rest of it, Cthulhu. Blah, 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 blah. Hey, welcome Cthulhu. It was definitely foreseeable. If you look at the book on the front cover of the Expedition Endurance box, you'll see a symbol. That symbol is one of the Cthulhu mythos gods. I think it's like the Yellow King or something, or the King in Yellow, whatever they call it. So just because a story is predictable doesn't mean it's bad. So sure, I'll take some Cthulhu, I'll take some elements of the thing. It's still cool to go through all that stuff. Um, so as a story, it worked. Like if you kind of looking back at it, I actually kind of really enjoyed it. Definitely not a lot of combat and not a lot of puzzle solving, which was those first two modules. This one was really heavy on the storytelling. If you like that, you like that. If you don't, this might be one to kind of look at and say, maybe not. So I mentioned in the main cast that I have felt like there's a lot of ideas were half baked. The first part with the fact that first time that messed up time jump didn't affect the regular flow of the game. I felt like that there was a little bit of missed opportunity there. I'm really talking about the madness cards. The madness cards, it's Cthulhu, so you have to have madness. That's like a trademark at this point. Man, there was so much potential there. It never came up. I think I got like a kleptomaniac madness card. Who cares? It never came up. There were a couple of other ones that I was looking at them after the scenario happened. Who cares? They never came up. They could have really just, with a couple of tweaks here and there, could have made those um, more impactful, more important. They could have really done what Dead of Winter tries to do, which is kind of set you up with these little sub goals that you have to do. But in Dead of Winter is very, very backstabby at times. So like, the colony needs food and you're hoarding the food. That's kind of a backstabby, douchebag move. Pardon my French here. So, but in this game, they really could have made it to where you're just kind of making a weird choice as opposed to a bad one, and it just didn't. They didn't really come through here. So that was a little bit disappointing. The cards at the end, the 666 cards, I don't care. I ended up looking at them. I don't care about my beacons or whatever it is. Didn't didn't matter. Cool, but wasn't integrated. And that's what I'm talking about, the half baked ideas where cool idea, cool idea, cool idea, not integrated into the main flow of the story. And also the fact that there was still that fetch questiness where our last run, we literally just said, okay, 15 time, couple sanity rolls. Let's get this item, this item, this item. Let's talk to this person, that person, this person. Boom, we're at the foot of the mountain and we're ready to do our thing. Didn't even play the game. We just got there and devoted, like said, okay, we're going to spend that 15 time. The fact that you can do that and the fact that you have to do that, ugh. Can we fix that, please? There has to be something. Maybe there's that's avoidable to some respect, or unavoidable because you are kind of Groundhog Day. You have to do the same thing over and over again. I'm getting a little bit sick of it. I think there's ways around it if you really think about it. So, you know, so that's one of the issues among a couple of other issues I had with it. You know, again, good module for what it was, which I think the thing this does best is the story element. Then yes, go for it. But enough issues there where I'm really starting to ask myself, okay, where is this really going? Is this really worth 25 whatever dollars a module to do it and have that kind of incomplete, unsatisfied thing lingering? I will spend money on the next couple modules. The first two were so amazing, or the first three were so amazing in their own ways. I'm in for the next few modules, but we need to, do something a little bit better here. So that's it. That's it for the full spoiler section. If you want to reach out to me and talk about this stuff, I am very available. I'm on Facebook. I'm on BGG, user Pope Sixtus. We can make our own little cabal of people who know time stories and everything. I'm still in. I will actually still play so any one of these modules if people who want to see it because I just love the time stories system. Um, so let's get into it, and hopefully the next few modules really come through and get me back up to that. Okay, this game's a perfect 10 point. So that's it. Later, everybody.